It is 9:01 a.m. on Thursday, August 7th, 2025. You are at a Marathon County Infrastructure Committee meeting. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Next on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda, we have public comment. Didn't have anybody approach staff prior to the meeting, and I don't see any public in the crowd. We have, good point, we have Supervisors Hardinger and Dickinson on WebEx, in addition to the three of us in the room here today. Vol contacted me, he was excused, and was Gisselman excused as well? Okay. So yes, thank you for that. We do have a quorum though. Next on our agenda is approval of July 9th, 2025 Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes. What is your pleasure? We have a motion.
I wasn't here, so I can't second.
You can still second.
You can second it, but you can't. I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments on the July 9th, 2025 meeting minutes? Hearing, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. We have unanimous approval of the July 9th, 2025 Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes. Sorry, I touched my microphone off. Number 5, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. Discussion and possible action by infrastructure. 1, discussion regarding 2026 annual budget development and policy recommendations from the committee, including review of the mandatory discretionary program document and discussion of rates and fees. We'll hand it over to staff.
Okay, I can kick it off, and I know HR Finance and Property Committee Chair Robinson is likewise here. As you all know, this is a recurring agenda item. Just a little update since the board last approved budget assumptions and budget priorities. Staff have been working to build those pieces into our budget planning. We continue to kind of refine the information we've received from our consultant relative to the wage study. In my mind, that's really implementation of the wage study is the most critical piece of the budget preparation process this year. So again, just for background, the county board last updated the compensation plan in 2022. As part of the administration work plan this year, it directed staff to go out and update that wage study. We've been working on that. Our consultant, this shouldn't be a surprise, I don't think, to anybody. I'm sure it's not a surprise. If you think about what's happened since 2022 in the broader community, but also specific to Marathon County and Marathon County government, you've seen equalized value, for example, go up 12%, 11%, 9%, and this year again, the equalized value increase is again 9% that just came out earlier this month. So a significant amount of growth relative to equalized value, which I think is a good, again, it's akin to inflationary pressures. The wage market is no different. We've been giving periodic updates to the HR Finance and Property Committee relative to some of the challenges or observations, certainly that we've had within our employee population. We have a significant amount of what we refer to as early turnover, which is individuals leaving the organization within 5 years. That amount of how much of that accounts for our turnover is well over 50%. And then when you dive into that, less than individuals leaving with less than 1 year of experience working with the county accounts for, got to refine my numbers, but it's either 28 or 24%. It's a significant amount, which correlates and it's consistent with our wage scale being behind, which our consultant has told us our scales are, we need to shift them about 10%. So we're working with the consultant to really dial in to see what that cost of implementation looks like. HR Finance is going to be making some decisions, some policy decisions in that regard next week, Wednesday. Our best estimate right now is about 7.65% cost of implementation. So that's going to be a big task I give to department heads, that what are we going to do to implement this? Because of course, we're not going to receive, net new construction came in at 1.61%. So we don't have funds from net new construction to do that. So it's going to require staff to do a lot to make that happen. So that's critical job number one, and why that is of import to you as you talk about and as staff are going to bring you recommendations relative to fees. When you consider the implementation of the wage study along with increases we expect, if you think about health insurance, for those of you that follow the health insurance market closely, the market is seeing between 8 and 10% increases in health insurance costs. Our neighbors in Portage County, their renewal rate, they're self-funded, was 22%, I think, Chris, is that right? 22? The renewal rate that the city was quoted, I believe, was 18%, City of Wausau. I know we're gonna be in a better position than that, and we're gonna work to bring that in and make changes as necessary to carry out the board's direction from the budget priorities and budget assumptions. But that just gives you context. We do need to increase fees. My best back of the napkin math right now is in the neighborhood of 10% when you roll compensation along with those health insurance costs together. If we don't do that, we are effectively subsidizing, increasing our subsidy with respect to those services. So that's kind of the background. I know I'm giving that direction to department heads to really look at what fees. The default should be an increase in that neighborhood. That said, we do know, and I know this committee understands, that there are some areas where we can't simply do that because the fees that we are charging also have some market component to them. Solid waste is a great example. We can't just increase fees at the solid waste department to take on the leachate management costs that the board has been talking about. If we were to build a leachate management system, over $10 million, we can't build that into the tipping fees because then the haulers would take their refuse somewhere else. So we would have we would kind of increase our financial challenge there. So the challenge to staff is going to be identify those fees that we can't follow that general recommendation of an increase, but that's really the only substantive update I have on kind of where we are in budget preparation at this point, and it's relative to fees. But again, this is the opportunity if you do have questions or comments discussion you want to have relative to programs that we offer, and those are again listed in that mandatory discretionary program document, the fees that the service levels of those programs, and then lastly, fees. I don't know, Committee Chair Robinson, if you had anything to add?
Thank you. Just following up on the administrator's comments, and again, looking at the county's budget, we've got approximately a $200 million budget. About 57 million comes off the levy, and the rest comes from fees, grants, and other things. And if we don't keep pace with the fees, we can't keep pace with the levy because of the levy limits. And so we'll either have to look at cutting programs or other approaches. But I think there are a couple of things that we need to look at. And I know Jerry has a report later, but that whole internal billing from CCIT has an impact on budgets as their costs go up. We used to, buy a lot of our software. Now we're leasing it, and those costs move from capital to internal and others. And we've dedicated approximately 35% of the KIP, and we don't have a lot of carryover from last year's budget because of the general fund, so we'll have to be creative relative to addressing the capital improvement program, and it's important that we then continue some of our existing funding sources. But we will have to have a future discussion, probably in the short term relative to the use of the highway reserves as it relates to the new highway project from a planning perspective. So maybe at a future meeting, we can add that and designating a portion of those for that. I think we want to plan, the borrowing rates are a lot higher than they were the last time we went to market. We went with the healthcare center, I think we were at 1.9% approximately. We're probably looking at 3 times that rate, 3 times that rate if we go. So I think the responsible use of the reserves relative to that for planning purposes, hiring the staff to develop it is appropriate, but I think that this committee needs to weigh in on that in the process. We already made commitments relative to next year or promises relative to the Regional Airport Development Fund. So we need to be cognizant of the limited resources that are flowing in from other sources and do our best to manage the programs within the budgets and make sure that we look at all funding sources.
Does anybody have any questions for Administrator Leonard? Or go ahead.
Just relative to fees, just to let you know, fees are kind of a low portion of our funding. Excuse me, our last report we ran, usually around $45,000. That's all we actually generate in fees. We did take a look at our fees a few years back. We did raise them about 3-4 years ago. We're relatively covering our costs right now. But again, it's just not a real high cost. And just touching on what John mentioned about using some reserves for our future expansion, Chris, Kevin, myself, Mary from our office, and Sam from finance, we did meet here last week to start that conversation. We're still waiting for some interest numbers, so hopefully later this month we can put something together to let you know exactly where we are with our reserve fund once we have those numbers all finalized. So we should have something here by the end of the month.
And just to build on that, as Chair Robinson referenced, I think that's critically important, not only for the, that reserve discussion relative to the highway relocation, potential relocation based on the update we'll give you later today, but to really be very direct with respect to our capital improvement rollover. Again, in light of some of the actions, the strategic decisions the board made relative to 2 things primarily. One, use of reserves just as a funding strategy, and that was done again as part of the 2025 budget, but also the loan to Bug Tussle for $8 million. The board elected not to do a conduit bond, which, again, through that discussion, conduit bonds don't impact your borrowing capacity necessarily and don't commit your own reserve funds. The board made the decision and elected to proceed with essentially a loan out of the general fund. What that did is it drove down the available reserves, which impacts your working capital calculation. And again, Marathon County has a long history of using that rollover following the audit to fund capital. We have $0 rolling over to fund capital this year because of we don't exceed our working capital designation. So Chris and I met, and Candace, and I'll introduce Candace later. Candace is the new Deputy County Administrator. And we met yesterday to talk through, what does our capital improvement needs look like, and zeroing out everything other than rolling stock and absolute requirements from a perspective of highway projects. Again, if we don't do highway projects, they follow you for 6 years because they impact your GTA, your general transportation aids. That number, if we just do those 2 things, is $4.7 million. So this is, you probably recall me saying during the, reserves are important, reserves are important, reserves are important, and they're impacting the capital budget. I'm confident we're going to have a good strategy to address at least a number of those things, but why the strategic use of highway reserves is really important. Jim alluded to this, as did Chair Robinson. If we go out to bond on a highway project that is, just for easy math, let's say $50 million, you incur additional cost to borrow. You incur, so that's the bonding, right? You pay bond counsel to draft the documents, review the documents, issuance costs, but then you also have interest, right? And our interest rate that we got when we last went to market was in that a little bit higher than the 1.9. But if you think back a little bit further, we had interest rates that were significantly below the 1.9. We borrowed at very, very good rates in 2018, 2019, 2020. Those rates don't exist right now. So it really makes good fiscal sense to take a look at, and staff are doing that, and we'll bring a recommendation to you to commit those reserve funds from the highway fund to that project to mitigate the need to borrow. And we've done a lot of the project that we'll talk about later in the update. You didn't borrow for any of the land acquisition costs or anything to this point. So we've made a lot of progress in a very, I think, fiscally responsible and strategic way. But as we talk about the budget, just remembering that impact on reserves, I think, is important.
Does anybody on the committee have any questions? Just a couple questions that I have in going through this and going back to the wage study. I think it's pretty clear how the wage study implementation would take place within the highway department, but within the airport and CCIT, some of our other oversight committees, how does that affect them?
Great question. So the airport is, generally speaking, not on the levy, correct? Right? We all know that. Apart from occasional utilizations of levy for things like the minimum revenue guarantee program that the board directed to be included in the budget this year. And we don't necessarily allocate or charge for all of the indirect support services that the airport utilizes, but all that aside, they are off levy. So their revenues, in speaking with Director Griefey right now, we're going to give them when we get the final information based on some direction from HR Finance, what the cost of that is, but I'm very confident they'll build that into their annual budget and it shouldn't be an impact. CCIT is a little bit different because, again, all of the revenue that goes into support city county information technology comes from generally three sources. Not generally, they come from three sources: City of Wausau, Marathon County, and North Central Healthcare. And we have chargeback mechanisms and cost-sharing policies that dictate how those charges go back. So that will have to come from existing county, city, and North Central Healthcare resources, budget resources. But met with Jerry a number of times. He knows what his, at least right now, kind of ballpark what those costs are going to be. They're going to have the same direction, at least from me, that a lot of the departments are. And we actually met yesterday and before that to talk about what are some areas we can be more efficient or software that we don't need. We've done a really good job over the last several years. I don't think we have a lot of low-hanging fruit in that regard, but we'll manage that. I mean, quite honestly, that's what staff, that's our job, is to make sure we're being as efficient as possible. But their funding comes from those three sources as opposed to the airport, which is airport revenues, generally speaking.
Any questions? Go ahead, Supervisor Jensen.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question with the interest in borrowing for the proposed highway project. Would a reduction in the interest rate from the Fed, if that does come into play, would that help reduce those interest payment costs? And then for the funding strategy for that highway project, we need to prove the project first, but then as part of paying for the project, do we need to take out all of the loans at the onset where we may incur a higher interest charge? Or can we fund some of that through that reserve fund and then do more borrowing as the project goes on?
Great questions. Short answer to your first question is yes. Any interest rate, any drop in the rate from the Fed will positively impact when we go out to market for bonding. Also, your second question, absolutely. We want to, rather than borrowing for, you don't go out and bond for $50 million. Generally speaking, we break up our bondings based on dollar amounts. You get a more advantageous rate sometimes based on the amount you borrow, and you absolutely do split it up. If you think back to the project we did with our Lakeview campus, we did bonding over a number of years. We didn't bond for all of it at the outset, and one of the primary reasons you do that is because of arbitrage. The requirement that when you borrow the money, you have to utilize it within a set period of time. You can't borrow money, governments can't borrow money through the bond market and then hold it and see if the interest rates go up. Kind of speculation, right? We need to use it within a set period of time. So even if you decided to borrow for the entire project, which I would certainly not recommend, because you do have highway reserves, and that's a far more fiscally responsible, from the perspective of taxpayers, far more fiscally responsible way to go. But even if you did borrow all that, you said, hey, we're going to bond for this whole project and service that debt through debt levy, you would break it up because that project, that timeline for that project and closing it out, even if construction only takes 18 months, the planning, the design, site readiness, and construction is going to stretch beyond that arbitrage limit. So we'd break it up. And that would be more advantageous from a interest rate perspective.
Thank you. And then I guess one other question for Commissioner Griesbach. So with the biannual budget, have we seen any real negative changes in funding for highway projects? I know we've been able to capture a lot of funds for the projects we've worked on in the past. Curious if we're going to see additional expense incurred that the state isn't helping us kind of recapture.
So the GTA did go up for us 3%, so that's positive. RMA funding, which is kind of in and out for us on the state, we're going to see a significant increase, which is going to help us with the wage issue. The SDP program remained level. Those are the big ones. The SDP includes bridges and roadways, and that remained level. So there was no negative impact. GTA went up, RMA went up.
If I can add one thing, I appreciate Jim's optimism on GTA. It did go up, the funding went up in the budget, but there's one big unknown on GTA, and that is it's a pot of money that gets allocated out against all the counties, right? And how it gets allocated is based on your 6-year average and how that average compares to other counties. So if we maintained our road spending and other counties ticked up, we're going to get less based on that formula. It's a set, probably, because the increased amount of money going into GTA is probably not going to cover the increased amount that all the other counties did. We hope it does, and we hope we get more actual dollars, but the real unknown is how do you compare to everybody else? We have done very well over the last several years to maintain, I think, that GTA spend, particularly in light of all the projects that we've gotten where there's an 80-20 split. And, we've leveraged a lot of that funding, whether it's state or federal funding for projects. But yes, the state budget certainly wasn't bad from infrastructure perspective, but that unknown is still, how are we going to shake out compared to every other county in terms of what we've been able to continue to allocate to those infrastructure projects. That's why when I said before, despite the fact that we have $0 rolling into our capital improvement program, it is critically important that we find funding to fund the highway projects that Jim's proposed, which my recollection was about $2.5 million worth of projects in the CIP that Chris showed us yesterday, thereabouts. We have to do those because without that spending, our GTA allocation I would fall over if it didn't drop if we cut those projects. And that, again, follows you for 6 years. If you have a low year, that's going to impact your average before it falls off.
Commissioner Litter, you had some comments earlier about turnover and number of staff that don't make it to 5 years, don't make it to 1 year. Do you have that data broken out by department? Just interested to know if the highway department is above, below, or average for those turnover rates.
Great question. I actually just sent that email to, I anticipated HR Finance having that question next week. I didn't anticipate you asking it today. We're going to look at that. I think certainly there are some departments and positions that have, in terms of gross turnover, more turnover than others. I mean, we have some positions, corrections is hard. It just is a challenging recruiting area. But it's also our largest department. So we'll be working on getting that. Jim, I don't know if you can speak anecdotally. I think we've done pretty well with our tenured staff within the highway department.
Yeah, I believe this year, we just had an internal conversation the other day. I believe this year in 2025, I believe we only lost, somebody went on total disability, we had a few retirements. I believe we only lost one person leaving to go to another municipality for a much higher rate. So the compensation is part of that, but I believe this year, probably one of our better years.
Wonderful. Any other questions budget-wise? I'm sure we'll come back to this. Go ahead, Supervisor Soibert.
You know, there hasn't been a lot of talk about the assets at the highway department, mainly that piece of property that they're sitting on now. That value, where does that value get used, and how does that value end up affecting Marathon County? And the second thing, when you see a 1/6 of an acre piece of property on Grand Avenue that's for sale for $775,000, what is the highway department, what's that land valued at if they sell that? And is that the highway department finance that, or did the county finance that, or where does that money end up?
Great question. I think that was one of the pieces of the discussion about how does that fit into the overall funding of the potential relocation of the highway facility off of West Street. And my suggestion would be, and it was, that we look at redeveloping that parcel and taking those funds to offset project costs. Now, we'd have to, you have a cash flow problem, right? You have to pay for the relocation, complete the relocation before you can sell the property you're currently operating on. But to Supervisor Jensen's question earlier about how do you fund that project and how do you stage it, the goal would be to, if you're asking me for a funding plan, the strategy would be assign a significant portion, about $30 million of highway reserve for that project, come up with a middle funding strategy, whether that's borrowing directly through the bond market or some combination of that in general fund cash flow. And then when we redevelop that parcel, those funds go back to mitigate and minimize ongoing interest or borrowing costs. But yes, absolutely, that 8 acres-ish, 8-9 acres that the highway department is currently on West Street, there is significant redevelopment opportunity. We had that presentation from Mr. Phillips that this committee and the HR Finance and Property Committee received. I think that's a big opportunity. You know, if we didn't have that and we were operating on a piece of property that wasn't valuable from a redevelopment standpoint, it'd be a bit more challenging. I don't know how much we're going to get for it, right? That's a function of the strategy you employ and the market at the time. But it is, I think it's an advantage that we have that our current site is in an area that is of value for redevelopment. And I would strongly suggest that we take those funds and put those towards the project. It doesn't make sense to have them utilized some other way, similar to the direction that this committee gave relative to 28th Avenue. The parcels that we obtained for that realignment of the 28th Avenue corridor decades ago, that's no longer a need. So we now have the opportunity to divest those parcels. Any revenue that would come from that would go back into the highway reserve and be available to, again, serve as an alternative to borrowing for the project costs.
Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, we will move on to item 5B, discussion and possible action by infrastructure to forward to county board for consideration. 1, update to clean up Marathon County Code of Ordinances, section 7.03, speed limits adopted. Turn it over to staff.
Thank you. We had gone through our speed limit ordinance where basically all of our highways by statute are 55-mile-an-hour roads. So whenever we have changes to that or reductions to it, they get posted in the ordinances. Over the years, we've noticed there's quite a few roads like Highway J or JJ, Highway SS that were still on there that are no longer under county jurisdiction. We also had some where we would change to a 45 and then change to a 35, and both of them were still on the books. So you can see in the document, we went through, struck everything off, and then just rewrote a cleaner version of all of that. So it's basically a cleanup of that, taking off the old roads that are no longer under our jurisdiction and eliminating some of those duplicates. We also had some where they would refer to a village limit, which the village limit had changed over time. So we reference that back to a street that the general public could more readily understand. So if you have any questions on that, field those, but otherwise that's the kind of summary of it.
Go ahead, Supervisor Jensen.
Thank you. Just 2 questions. Were any speed limits changed kind of as part of this rewrite? It doesn't sound like it.
No.
Okay. And then just a little thing. Between the current ordinance and the proposed ordinance maps, the legend coloring is different, which that made it kind of difficult for me to see if there were any changes in there. So that would be helpful if they were the same.
Yeah, I did notice that when our guys had put that together, that it's just, it was an automatic thing, so they didn't assign them, but we could clean that up if that would help at all, but.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the ordinance that's in our packet.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion from Jensen, second by Swaber, to recommend approval of the ordinance onto county board. Further questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of recommending approval of the ordinance signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed? We have unanimous recommendation to move this on to county board. Thank you. Next on the agenda, educational presentations committee discussion, number 6. 6A, highway operation monthly update. We'll hand it over to Jim.
It was in your packet, so I'm not going to get it step by step, but there's a couple things to note. There's more on the state projects than the county projects, but the Highway 29 west of Wausau, from Marathon into town, they will be flipping the traffic over next week to complete that other lane. That project is scheduled to finish mid to late September. The Highway I-39 project south of Wausau, they still are on schedule. Again, that's a project that's going to be getting wrapped up here later this month, early September. I do receive, generally every Monday, I get an email from someone not happy that they drive through there and there's no one out there working. That's for safety reasons. There are work restrictions out there. They need to be finished by noon on Friday, so that's how come, if you drive through there, you don't see anybody working on Friday. That's the reason. A couple on the county side, we do have a number of bridges that aren't listed. We had 10 bridges going on this year through the SDP Bridge Program. That includes, because we oversee the town bridges also. There's 10 bridges, only 4 of them have started to this point. There's a number of the bridges, quite a few of the bridges, the highway, most of them out west on the western front, Highway H, Fairview Road. Those bridges are all going to be starting after Labor Day, so they'll be going right up till deer hunting season for those completions. So with the rain this year, a lot of bridge contractors just fell behind. There was a lot of work out there this year, so unfortunately, a lot of those projects are getting pushed back to the bitter end on the county side. But otherwise, we have wrapped up our mowing except in the construction areas like Highway 29. When that traffic gets flipped over, we can go mow that median out. So otherwise, you have your packet. If you have any questions, Kevin or I could field those.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, well, thank you for your report. We are on to item 6B, CCIT projects. Mr. Klein.
Thank you. A couple of, I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of things that they're taking a lot of attention from us. So well, that's a little loud. The Regional Forensic Science Center is wrapping up. The open house is next week. I think there's a ribbon cutting on the 13th. We have a lot of electronics, a lot of technology in that place, and we have a punch list of, it's all working, but there's a punch list of things that we're going to clean up, improve, change camera angles and those kinds of things. So that is, that's going along really well. If you're not aware, North Central Healthcare has had a contract to support Pinecrest Nursing Home in Merrill for the last couple of years, and thus we have been supporting the PC, Wi-Fi, network access at Pinecrest Nursing Home, and that sale closed at midnight on Friday, and the new owners took over, replaced all of the, almost all the equipment that we have in there. That's Ensign Group. And we'll be going up today with a box truck to pick up a whole bunch of equipment. So that's in pretty good shape. We still have a facility up there. North Central Healthcare rents office space up there for outpatient services in the building next to it. Ensign bought that building, so there's a lease between us and North Central Healthcare and Lincoln County for the office space that we have up there. So City County IT will continue to support a facility up there, but it'll be smaller than the footprint that we had up there before. The Pinecrest Nursing Home was actually fairly large. If you're not familiar that hadn't been there, they had over 60 computers in that place. It was actually a fairly large complex. I think they had 11 copiers, of pretty good coverage on Wi-Fi. They had relatively moderate coverage on cameras, but there's still some work to do to disconnect us from that. But in any event, the turnover to Ensign went pretty smoothly on Friday night. We had a little blip for about an hour. They had their nurse contact system was down as we switched over, and the original hope was that there wouldn't be any outage on that, but there ended up being about an hour while the two network teams worked out some issues. We have the next couple of things in front of us are Workday is eliminating a security mechanism called challenge questions. All of our staff, typically our core county employees, do multi-factor authentication into Workday with the normal multi-factor authentication that we use for everybody else, which is Microsoft Authenticator. But we have a number of groups that are adjunct, kind of what we talked about earlier, Mr. Chair. ADRC, airport, and there's some other entities like that that need to access Workday because the county is in charge of their payroll, but they're either not county employees or they're sort of indirect county employees, and that causes a bunch of license and challenge questions for us. So we've been working through that. I believe we've resolved the issues, and now we're implementing that. So the ADRC, the airport, Central Wisconsin Airport, and then a couple of other groups will have to by September 20th, which is the next big conversion date for Workday. They'll have to switch from these challenge questions to a new multi-factor authentication. So it's actually a lot more work than we expected. There's a couple hundred people involved, and we're working on that. We are continuing to work at replacing our management of our mobile devices, trying to get over to Microsoft's Intune platform. That is also a lot more work than I expected, and Lance got dragged into that. It was actually fairly complicated. We're continuing to work on that. In the next couple of months, the big focus is going to be on Chris's team and my team is going to be working on jail intercom project. We're going to get an RFP out and address that. I think we've talked about that in here before. The jail needs some intercom system. I would say lightly it needs some TLC, and it's an expensive system. Would that be a fair statement, Chris? When he and I have been up there, we're like, wow, yeah, this is a lot of work and it's a mess. It's about 4 different systems that have to talk to each other in order for people to walk through the doors as they go through the jail. And those systems, many of them are at end of life or beyond end of life. So we're working on that. We will be signing a contract this week with a vendor to replace our phone system. We'll be moving to Cisco's WebEx cloud solution. So those are kind of the next big four things that'll keep us busy for the next 2 or 3 months. Any questions on my update?
Any questions?
Thanks.
Hearing none, thank you for your report. We are on to item C, August 6th, Highway Safety Meeting Update.
I'll just bring it up here. It's not part of your packet due to the meeting was just yesterday afternoon. Mic is on. I'm just soft-spoken. The meeting was this yesterday afternoon, so I will work with clerk's office to get you this information. But we did have our quarterly meeting of the Marathon County Traffic Safety yesterday. I won't go through all the slides, I'll just kind of hit the highlights. This is kind of a map showing all crashes from 5/7 till 8/6. We'll get into the fatalities a little bit later. But again, all this comes from community maps. We talked a little bit about how to get through community maps if anybody needs any training and help. There are links to, if you need to go to any of these, like work zone, crash reporting, anything that you wanted to work on, there is a help tab in there. It kind of helps the officers talk about failure to stop compared to failure to yield, which actually there was a fatality this past month regarding that, which I can talk to again. There are some resource tabs that you can go to. So if you want to just bring up something about teen driving, there's already PowerPoints out there for all this. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So there are a lot of great sources in the community, the map. Now to the dashboard. The dashboard can give you some comparisons, and we'll just take a look at the comparisons for Marathon County. So if you take a look at these maps here, or these charts, they're comparing the 21, 22, and 23. They're in the light blue, and the dark blue kind of shows where we're sitting in comparison for 2024. So on the left side, it kind of gives you the numbers. On the right side, percent of change. So you're always looking, you want green, you don't want red. So we're doing pretty well here in Marathon County in 2024. If you see our crashes, we're sitting at 2,053 compared to the 3-year average of 2,205. So we are down a little bit everything. It talks about driver behavior on the bottom part. The 65 and older, that is a little bit higher, but again, people are getting older, right, John? It talks about, it gets more into pedestrians and motorcycles and bicycles. There are more people out there biking. There does seem to be a trend to have more accidents on the bike side. One thing, Todd Troy was there, got into it a little bit yesterday, was, Todd's opinion a lot has to do with the e-bikes. Unfortunately, the accident reporting form, the MV4000, does not separate e-bikes compared to the traditional bikes. So with the high number of e-bikes out there and some of those approaching 30 miles an hour, I believe, you're going to see more accidents with there. So that does seem to be a trend out there. The one that I'm a little bit worried about again is, my passion for the past years about work zones. We do see a higher number of work zones. Again, that has to do, I believe, with inattentive drivers, people being on their phones while they're doing that. There are some lane deviations in intersection, but again, we're doing very well. And then Todd, what he did is just to give people an idea, he brought out picked a few different areas. So this is the city of Wausau. Again, Wausau's doing very well on their crashes. They're all down. The 65 and older, again, is ticking higher. Here's the pedestrians, motorcycles, CMVs, and bikes. Again, you see a few of those trending higher. He picked Rothschild. Rothschild is having a significant more injuries and accidents down there, so I believe there's a lot more traffic in Rothschild, probably in 24 than 21. There's a lot more business and development down there, so more traffic, you're going to see more accidents. Again, the bicycles take a big jump up. Here was Marshfield. Marshfield, don't know why, but they're exceeding their numbers, so they'll be working with the city of Marshfield is working on ways to stop this. Kronenwetter, there you go. Kronenwetter's doing very well. The numbers of accidents and injuries in Kronenwetter, they've dropped significantly in 2024 compared to the 3 years. But again, you can go to any community, any township. Here's the town of McMillan. If you go to community maps and see, you're curious what's happening in your neck of the woods or your community, you can bring those up. I won't go through the law enforcement. They are starting a campaign on wrong way driving, and it's actually happening here in Marathon County. They're having a high number of wrong way drivers, and what happens is a lot of times, as you see on this slide, is if you have the on-ramp and off-ramp very close to one another, there is one of these down in Rothschild going from Business 51 to 29 East. Both ramps are there. So they are looking at improving that intersection itself with signage, and they actually are going to put in a detector that will detect vehicles coming up the ramp the wrong way. It detects motion and heat. This is the only one that's going in north of Milwaukee. It's going to go in later this month. We need to do a lane closure out there later this month to help them with that. But this is one of their test areas how they're working on the wrong way driver going up the ramps. It seems to be a higher number of those happening. Again, a lot of times it is the elderly, so they're putting in more signs. They're putting them at lower levels, so they're more in sight distance. So it's a strategy that the Wisconsin DOT is using right now. Wisconsin fatality totals right now for 2025, we are exactly at the 5-year average of 311. And the crashes are a little bit lower, but the fatalities are higher, so there's more people in cars. So in Marathon County, we did have, there's only 3 shown here. We have 3, but we actually talked about 4 different fatalities in Marathon County this past quarter. The one that I'm circling right here on 2972nd, they're probably going to drop that out of the fatality because it was more of a suicide. The person ran into the lane of traffic, and they have determined there was a suicide, so they are going to drop that one off the fatalities. The one on Highway 97 that occurred, unfortunately, a 10-month-old had passed away in that accident. Due to some weather conditions, the vehicle had bald tires on, and the child was not properly in a car seat. So we talked about that quite a while, about how to bring recognition to child safety and car seats. Aspirus does have a program. They reach out to communities. They go out to different communities during the year. They go Abbotsford, Athens, Kronenwetter. They talked about different ideas how to bring knowledge to most kids when they go to these checkpoints are not properly placed in their seats. So that was unfortunate incident there. There was one out in Weston at Camp Phillips and East Everest Avenue with a high rate of speed. Gentleman was driving southbound, and somebody was making a left turn and did not happen. And then there was also one in Mosinee that's not mapped here. Again, that was a failure to, not a failure to stop, failure to yield. The motorist did stop and pulled back out, did not see the motorcyclist, and struck the motorcyclist and was killed. So those were the 4 fatalities, and they're going to drop it down to 3 with the one on 21. There is a governor's conference coming up on highway safety, August 19th and 20th at the Kalahari in Wisconsin Dells, and I'm talking about topics there. So that was our meeting yesterday. Again, I will get this presentation that Todd Horn did out to you for your packet.
Thank you. Question from Soibert?
Thank you. Jim, are they tracking, since the county is allowing ATVs, are they tracking ATV accidents?
Yes and no. So if there's an accident with a vehicle, it gets tracked through the MV4000. If somebody is in the back 40 and has a accident, that's with the DNR. So they fill out a separate report for the DNR. They are trying to combine those two right now through the MV4000, that they would be reported through this system. There is a way to go in here and bring up your DNR records, but they're two different records. So it depends on the type of accident. If it's on the roadway involving another vehicle, they are reported. The other thing that they're finding is there's a lot of UTV accidents not reported.
Just further on that question, so I understand, that's what's being reported if it's, say it's 2 ATVs or UTVs or a single ATV or UTV rollover or something like that, is that reported as part of the system you can see? Because I think, to Supervisor Server point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people are always allowed to run ATVs, UTVs on the back 40. I don't think that's the concern of what we did, but a number of years ago, we made a significant choice to allow ATV, UTV use on a lot of our county highways. So just interested to know if that's affected safety at all or how that's being tracked.
If they are reported and an accident report's filled out, then it is reported through the system.
Gotcha. Thank you. If we have no further questions, we can move on to our next item, which is item D, update on property acquisition planning process for potential highway shop relocation.
I'm back. So we did go out for RFPs for architectural design and services. We had a meeting 2-3 weeks ago. It was a mandatory meeting. If you wanted to put a RFP in for this project, you needed to come to the meeting. We had 22 individuals at the meeting representing 18 different firms. The RFP is due in 6 minutes. At 10 o'clock, the RFPs are due. So we are anticipating to have a stack of those to go through today. As soon as this meeting is completed, Kevin, myself, and Troy will be going through those RFPs. And at that point, we'll determine if we need to interview anybody or if there's somebody that rises to the top. So looking forward to going through those RFPs today. Once we have a selection, we will bring it back to the committee before we make another step.
Wonderful. Thank you for that update. Any questions? If not, we'll move on to item E, update on highway management staffing.
As you are aware, this is my last highway committee meeting. The next meeting will not be moved till September 3rd, as already suggested. So we went through the process of interview. I was not part of that, but we have selected a new highway commissioner. He will be present at our next, he's actually present at this meeting. Kevin has been selected to follow me up to serve as the next commissioner, and I have every confidence in the world he will exceed the past commissioner on what he's been doing. Kevin's been with us for a long time, and I will also be there for any questions. We also are looking for a new highway shop superintendent because our shop supervisor's leaving one day before me. He's leaving on the 2nd of September. We do have an internal candidate that we have selected. We have not come to terms with them yet, so that one's kind of in the negotiation phase. So we hope to have that one up in position here so we can do some cross-training before both Jeff and I leave. But again, I am leaving you in excellent hands with Kevin. He'll serve you well.
Thank you for that update. Congratulations, Kevin.
Acceptance speech.
Next on the agenda, next meeting date, time announcements, future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. Go ahead, yeah.
Relative to the change in administration, I'm not on the committee, but I've been a member of the infrastructure committee and had the honor of chairing it for a period of time. And I think we are going to be in good hands, but I think we often undervalue the contributions of people in positions. And I think Jim Griesbach, from several perspectives, has been an outstanding employee and a leader not only in the county but in the state of Wisconsin, whether it's highway safety, securing state and federal funds. And we have a highway system that's in good shape because of his foresight and the two of them working together. But with Jim's leadership, I don't think there was a funding source that they didn't turn over when they evaluated projects. And I think we saw that when we started looking at ARPA dollars and in some of the federal dollars that came in. And Jim shook trees and found money, and we benefited from those. And he brought a high degree of professionalism. And I personally want to wish you well and thank you for your many years of dedicated service to the county.
Yep.
Thank you. I'd like to thank this committee and all my past committees. I have had some excellent county board chairs. I've had some excellent highway committees, highway committee chairs, going all the way back to Bob. And, I was blessed. I know many commissioners in the state, and I hear a lot of horror stories, and I always tell them, when you have a county board chair call you up to see how your day's going and it's got a good joke to tell you, it's a special relationship that you can have with your county board chairs and highway committees, and I've had a bunch of them in 35 years. So I appreciate everything the county has done for myself and my family.
Thanks, Jim.
And I got reunited with Tom from working Buccaneer when I was 16 years old, so meeting's over.
All right, so our next meeting date is Wednesday, September 3rd. I'm just kidding. Next meeting date is Thursday, September 4th, 2025, 9 a.m. And before we get to adjournment, I want to thank Jim as well and acknowledge your years of service. You've been here for a while, and I think we can all say that because of you and your department's roles and what you've done, Marathon County and our citizens are in a lot better place than if you wouldn't have. So thank you for all your work, your team's work, and leaving your position in good hands with Kevin. Thank you. And with that, we're up for adjournment. Seibert with the motion, second by Jensen.
Randy, just a reminder for Culvert Day that comes up in September too, that usually we end up having a special meeting for that just before we're in the county board meetings.
Sounds good, yeah, absolutely. We have a motion and second for adjournment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, thank you. We are adjourned at 10 a.m.
Lit up 200 of the 600.